Welcome back into the archives. Dear traveller, settle in and let your shoulders drop. Tonight we're stepping into the quiet, sun-faded world of medieval laundresses, the women who scrubbed, wrung, lifted and carried their way through days most people never stop to think about. Before we wander down to the washing green, tell me where in this great big world you are watching from. It is always so wonderful to hear just how far our boring, sleep-inducing history reaches. And if you've ever done laundry so heavy it made you question your life choices, you'll fit right in tonight. So, if you enjoy these slow, calming dives into everyday historical lives, make sure you like, subscribe and tap that bell so you never miss another peaceful drift through the past. Now breathe deeply, the river is waiting. The day begins before it has the nerve to become a day at all. The sky hangs in a deep blue-grey, that quiet in-between where the darkness hasn't quite surrendered but the light is already stretching its fingers along the edges. You walk toward the riverbank with the laundresses, moving through a world that hasn't woken yet. Everything feels paused, still. Even the wind seems to hold its breath. Your footsteps land on soil that is cool, slightly damp, and comfortably familiar to anyone who has walked this path 1,000 times. The laundresses carry buckets and baskets in slow, steady strides. There's no flash, there's no rush. Just bodies slipping into a rhythm so old that even the river remembers it. Worn handles knock against their palms. Weary hands grip rough wood without hesitation. Their breath fogs in the cold morning air, drifting upward like tiny accidental prayers. The washing place waits ahead, the same patch of riverbank used by generations before them. Stones smoothed by centuries sit in a row beside the water, ready to endure another day of relentless scrubbing. Wooden tubs stand nearby, tilted slightly from uneven ground, but loyal all the same. The river itself glides past in a calm, unhurried whisper, as though it has accepted its fate in the never-ending fight against stains. There's a peacefulness here, the kind you only get before sunrise, when the world hasn't yet remembered how loud it likes to be. The town behind you is still sleeping, shutters are closed, chimneys are resting, and animals are tucked in their pens. But out here the laundry begins long before the baker stirs, long before the first market stall is opened, and long before anyone thinks about bread, bartering, or business of any kind. The laundresses show up because life demands their presence. Dirty clothes do not wait for the sun. You hear the soft clatter of buckets placed on the grass. Fabric rustles inside woven baskets. Water gurgles where the river curves, brushing against rocks as if nudging them awake. One laundress kneels beside a tub and checks its condition. A small, habitual glance. Another woman bends to straighten her apron, tightening the folds. The movements are simple and slow, the kind made by people who know there's no point rushing the inevitable. You can feel the cold settle on your wrists, on your cheeks, and on the bridge of your nose. The laundresses feel it too, but they've long made peace with it. The chill of dawn is just another part of the work, a permanent companion that bites at their fingertips before the water ever does. Their hands are already rough, already cracked, and shaped more by labor than by softness. They're built for this hour, for its silence, its repetition, and its uncelebrated beginning. The riverbank stretches out like an unrolled scroll, waiting to be filled with the day's slow story. Buckets will splash, cloth will slap against stone, water will shift and tumble. But for now, everything is still pressed against the hush of early morning. The laundresses settle into their spaces, finding the same spots they use every day. Instinct guides them more than thought does. You stand beside them and let your breath fall into the same quiet rhythm. There is no hurry. This is work that's older than memories, towns, schedules and deadlines. Laundry begins when the sky is still waking up. because there is simply too much of it to start after the sun has done its job. The first hint of light touches the water. It doesn't brighten much at first. It just lays a faint stripe of silver across the moving surface. The laundresses watch without looking, sensing the moment more than seeing it. Light means the day has officially noticed them. It means the work is about to shift from preparation into motion. But for a brief moment, just before the labor starts in earnest, the world holds its breath. The river coils past like a long, cold ribbon. Steam rises faintly from the few pots that were warmed by leftover coals. The women stand with baskets at their feet, hands hanging in a calm, low-battery kind of stillness. The stillness before the long marathon of the day. You take in the scene slowly, the worn fabric edges peeking out from the baskets, the uneven stones that will soon be beaten with cloth, the pale light gathering in the sky, the silhouettes of women wrapped in shawls and determination. Nothing dramatic happens, no proclamations, no announcements, no grand gestures, just quiet, just distinguished people ready to work, just a river waiting to carry away the grime of an entire community. Dawn finally edges into true morning, pushing the darkness back with a soft insistence. The laundresses straighten their spines, tighten their grips on buckets and cloth, and step into the rhythm they know all too well. The day has begun, long before the town acknowledges it, here at the washing place. Before the washing can truly begin, there must be sorting, the slow, careful ritual that decides the fate of each garment. You watch the laundresses open their baskets and pull out piece after piece, unfolding them with a practiced motion that reveals every rip, stain, and reminder of daily medieval life. The fabric types come first, wool in one pile, linen in another, hemp in a third. Each material behaves differently, and the laundresses know this without needing to think about it. Wool holds water like a stubborn sponge. Linen lightens quicker. Hemp scratches the skin and refuses to pretend otherwise. You see their hands hover briefly over each cloth, feeling weight, thickness, and weave. Nothing is labelled, nothing is marked, yet they know exactly what each one is the moment their fingers brush the surface. You kneel beside them, observing the slow, almost meditative process. Every fold releases another detail: mud streaks, ink spills, grass stains, patches barely hanging on, and seams stretched wider than they were ever meant to go. Medieval clothing has a hard life, and the evidence shows. The laundresses examine each piece with understated seriousness, as though reading a quiet biography written into the cloth. The stains are catalogued silently, the deep, rust-coloured spots that cling to wool, the smudges across collars, the patches of ash, soot, the faint shadows left by spilled ale. Some garments carry marks that look older than the people wearing them. But nothing surprises the laundresses anymore. Stains arrive, stains leave, some stains refuse to leave. The work goes on either way. Nearby, large tubs sit filled with lye water from the night before. You approach the nearest one and catch the scent immediately. The scent is strong, chalky and biting. Wood ash mixed with water turns into something both simple and harsh, and the smell hangs thick in the air. Clothes soaked overnight float just beneath the surface, their shapes softened in the cloudy solution. The laundresses lift a few pieces with long wooden sticks, letting the excess liquid drip back into the tub. The water is pale grey, swirling with the residue of yesterday's dirt. Soap root lies bundled on a cloth nearby, its leaves bruised slightly to release the sud-producing juice. When crushed, it carries a faint, earthy smell, like something between damp soil and fresh-cut stems. You touch one of the bundles, and feel the softness beneath your fingertips. This is the medieval version of gentle cleaning. Everything else will sting a little. The women begin checking the soaked garments, assessing whether they're ready to be scrubbed or need more time in the lye. Some fabrics still feel too heavy with old grime. Others are ready, pliable enough for the day's hard work. It's a judgment that comes from endless repetition, not from instructions. They know the difference the way you know when a coat is fully dry or when a towel still has that cold, stubborn damp inside it. The air fills with layered scents, the sharpness of lye, the earthy soap root, the unmistakable smell of wet cloth, and the faint smoky undertone of last night's ashes. Nothing is pleasant in the modern sense, but everything is honest. The smell of labour, of routine, of living close to the materials of everyday survival. As you watch the laundresses prepare the next round of garments, the river continues slipping past in slow, muted swirls. The world is waking now, faintly, but this place remains wrapped in its own rhythm. Sorting cloth is not a dramatic task, yet it holds a strange kind of calm. An orderliness that contrasts the chaotic stains of the garments themselves. Hands move with gentle precision, folding, inspecting, and setting aside. The ladies lift the clothing, recheck it, and then re-immerse each piece. The motions repeat until every piece has been assessed and every pile designated. It's methodical, tactile, and almost soothing if you let yourself fall into the rhythm with them. There is no rush. Laundry takes the time that it takes. Once the sorting is complete, the laundresses tighten their aprons and brace themselves for the next part of the day. The work will get harder soon, the scrubbing, the beating and the wringing. But for now, this quiet preparation provides a moment of steady, grounded labour before the true effort begins. The river flows on, the piles of cloth sit ready, and the day, still young, waits patiently for the washing to start. The washing tools wait like old companions, battered, stripped of elegance, but faithful to the job and impossible to replace. You stand among them as the light grows brighter over the riverbank, illuminating each item in a quiet display of medieval practicality. Everything is sturdy, heavy, and shaped by years of use. Closest to the water sit the wooden tubs. Their sides are swollen slightly from constant soaking, the grain warped into soft curves that speak of seasons spent exposed to river damp and sun heat. The lye solution inside them forms a pale, cloudy surface that shivers whenever a breeze touches it. You catch a faint shimmer like the water is coated in dust. That film isn't dust, it's ash. Months and months of ash burned down from countless hearth fires, now floating in a mixture strong enough to strip the oils from any cloth that dares enter it. Beside each tub rests a small pile of ash bundles. They look humble, just little cloth-wrapped lumps of powdery grey, but the laundresses use them like a craftsman uses fine tools. When the lye needs strengthening, one of these bundles is broken open and sifted through the surface of the water, darkening it slightly and deepening the mixture. You watch one bundle get tipped over the tub. The ash drifts slowly downward like snow that is not bright. It settles on the water, dissolving slowly. Nearby, wooden paddles lean in a group, each one shaped by hand. Their edges are rounded from years of slapping, stirring, and beating wet fabric into submission. Some paddles are longer, meant for mixing deep tubs. Others are shorter, designed for closer work at the river stones. Every paddle bears marks, dents, grooves, and scratches, each one a tiny record of stains fought and stains surrendered to. Soap made from leftover fat sits in small, uneven blocks. These are nothing like modern bars. cloths. There's no fragrance, no softness, no artistic swirl of colour, just solid, chalky slabs of rendered fat boiled with lye until they harden into dense bricks. They feel heavy in your hand, greasy yet dry at the same time. When rubbed against cloth, they leave a thin, milky residue that foams only slightly, just enough to announce that the cleaning has begun. The laundresses handle the soap with steady confidence. They never expect it to behave kindly. Nothing in their world is designed for comfort. Everything is designed for necessity, and this soap, being harsh, crumbly, and practical, gets the job done. That is its entire purpose. Another set of tools lies closer to the river, the beaters, thick flat boards carved from dense wood. These are the most brutal instruments of all. They thud against fabric with a heavy sound that echoes off the water, a dull percussion that marks the rhythm of the day. You lift one briefly and feel the weight of it. Imagine swinging that thing hundreds of times. Imagine doing it with cold, wet wrists and already tired arms. The laundresses do it every day. Rough cloth sits in a stack near the beaters. They're used not for drying, but for gripping slippery fabric, for scrubbing delicate fibers that cannot withstand direct beating, and for wiping the lye-soaked water from the edges of the stones. This cloth bears old stains of their own, reminders of mornings spent absorbing the excess. They never fully dry out, always a little damp, always a little stiff. You look down at the women's hands, the most important tools of all. Their hands are dry, cracked and stiffened from the cold water and harsh solutions. Their knuckles are reddened by repeated immersion, with nails short and worn. These hands know the work intimately. They do not hesitate. They do not waver. They have learned how to grip wet cloth without dropping it, how to hold a paddle steady, how to rub soap root into linen without tearing the weave. Centuries of knowledge exist in their movements. Touching the lye water is not pleasant. You dip a finger in briefly, a foolish experiment, and feel the sting immediately. The solution bites at your skin, leaving it taut and slightly irritated. But the laundresses submerge entire arms in this mixture without complaint. It's the nature of the job. The clothes must be cleaned, and there is no gentler method available. The lye solution shifts and swirls as garments are lifted from it. The water carries a faint sheen, the surface glowing slightly under the growing sun. Soaked garments emerge heavy, dripping suds and residue. They are ready to be scrubbed, beaten and rinsed. The tools wait for them like old allies, ready to begin the day's relentless cycle. The river beside you murmurs with a quiet acceptance of what's coming. The river stands ready to help today and always. Medieval life relies on these simple tools: tubs, ash, paddles, soap root, and hands, toughened by years of contact with water that never warms enough to be soothing and kind. Everything is in place now. The tools stand ready. The lye water is mixed and strengthened. The soaked garments are sorted and waiting, and the laundresses, already slipping into the calm focus of repetitive work, prepare for the long hours ahead. Nothing glamorous lies in these tools, nothing delicate, but they form the backbone of every clean garment in town, proof that even the simplest instruments can shape the rhythm of a community. The river flows steadily, the paddles lean against their tubs, and the day stretches forward, inviting the laundresses to begin. The washing begins with a slow bend toward the water. You feel it in your own spine as the laundresses lean forward, their hands sinking into the cold river with a familiarity that borders on resignation. The temperature bites instantly, a sharp sting that travels up the wrists and settles deeply into the bones. This water is never friendly. It is simply a tool, a necessary and unforgiving partner. Wet fabric slaps onto river stones with a dull, heavy thud. The stones themselves are smooth from generations of this exact task, worn down by the endless back and forth of cloth grinding against their surfaces. You move closer and see droplets scatter when a tunic hits the rock, tiny pearls of water that catch the early sun before falling back into the river. The rhythm forms quickly. Each laundress slips into her usual pace, steady and unchanging. A garment is laid across the stone. A paddle rises, then falls in a firm, deliberate strike. The sound echoes repeatedly, steady, predictable, and almost hypnotic. It blends with the river's murmur, creating a slow, layered symphony of work. You watch as hands grip wet cloth tightly, with thumbs locked and palms firm. The laundresses push the fabric against the stone, dragging it back with a long, scraping glide. The sound is unmistakable, a wet, gritty rasp that marks progress in increments too small to see but too important to skip. Every stroke removes a little more grime, a little more dirt, a little more of the long medieval week embedded into the weave. The river swirls around ankles and hems. Skirts darken with absorbed water. The fabric clings to calves, heavy and cold, but nobody stops to shake it off. The work always goes on and on. A sleeve is lifted, squeezed, and beaten again. A collar is scrubbed until the fibers look white enough to satisfy even the most demanding household. A woolen garment is wrung out with both arms, straining, twisting the water out in thick ropes that spiral toward the riverbank. The physicality of the task becomes obvious the longer you watch. Shoulders flex with each downward motion. Elbows lock and unlock. Backs curve and straighten in a slow, repetitive cycle. Every movement has weight. Every action demands strength. The laundresses move without theatrics, without wasted motion. Efficiency is carved into their muscles. They scrub because scrubbing is most necessary. They rinse because rinsing is the next step. They beat the fabric because that's what removes the dirt. There is no shortcut, no easier path, no clever innovation waiting in the wings. Medieval laundry obeys one single rule: work until the stain eventually gives up. Water splashes up the stones in tiny arcs. Suds swirl away downstream, drifting toward whatever lies beyond the bend in the river. The garments slowly lighten as hours pass. The fibers soften, the folds loosen. The cloth becomes cleaner, brighter, more willing to be worn again. You sense the repetition deepen into something oddly calming. The motion never changes. The order never shifts. The tasks are the same today as they were last year, last decade, last century. Washing clothes at the river is a time-honored ritual, a predictable anchor in a world full of unpredictable events. You find yourself sinking into it. The repetition dulls the sharp edges of thought. The slow pace eases the mind into softness. Even the cold water seems gentler when viewed through the lens of routine rather than hardship. By midday, the stones are slick with water, the ground muddy beneath the women's feet, and the river filled with swirling trails of diluted lye and soap-root foam. But the task continues, steady and unwavering. Laundry in the medieval world isn't glamorous, fast, or celebrated, but there is something undeniably grounding in its repetition, something honest, steady, and deeply human. The river accepts each garment as it is plunged in for a final rinse. The stones hold firm beneath every beating, and the laundresses keep moving, locked into the breath-slowing cadence of the washing green. The true burden of the laundress's day reveals itself not in the scrubbing, nor in the lye, nor even in the endless bending over the river. It appears the moment a soaked garment is lifted, the moment water transforms fabric into something that feels more like a living creature than clothing. You watch as a laundress grips the shoulders of a woolen tunic and pulls. The fabric rises slowly, dragging against the stone, each inch upward accompanied by a visible strain in her arms. Water pours out in steady streams, cascading back onto the stone slabs below. The tunic looks simple when dry, but now it weighs as much as a small child who refuses to be cooperative. The laundresses treat it like a stubborn companion, not with patience exactly, but with inevitability. Wet wool is a beast, heavy and relentless. It absorbs water until it becomes a sodden mass, determined to resist every attempt to move it. You can see the weight pulling downward, stretching the arms of the woman holding it. Her shoulders tighten. Her stance widens for balance. Her breath deepens, steady and controlled. This is ordinary strength, not dramatic or boastful, but forged by repetition. The linen pieces aren't much lighter. They cling to themselves in tight folds, holding pockets of water that refuse to release until wrung out with both hands. The laundresses twist them with slow, practiced torque, wrists turning in opposite directions, muscles standing out along their forearms, water spiraling down in twisting ribbons. The motion is rhythmic but undeniably physical, the kind that builds strength through sheer necessity. You can feel the effort in your own arms as you watch them work. Imagine lifting a waterlogged blanket again and again, then twisting it harder than you'd twist anything in your daily life. Now imagine doing that, not once, not a dozen times, but over the course of hours, every day, without pause from season to season. This is the part of medieval life the paintings never mention, the weight of it all, the simple, honest heaviness of everything. Clothing is heavier, water is heavier, tools are heavier. Life itself seems to lean toward the side of weight. The laundresses adapt. Their bodies carry the memory of this work in every muscle. Knees bend smoothly as they lower themselves to pick up another dripping garment. Backs straighten with quiet resolve as they prepare to lift again. Even the way they plant their feet reflects the life they live, grounded, stable, and always ready for another load. You notice the subtle fatigue creeping into their movements. The pace doesn't change much, but the effort deepens. Their arms move slower but with more conviction. Their shoulders roll forward slightly as they haul wet fabric from tub to stone, stone to river, and river to basket. The cold water adds its own weight, stiffening their fingers and numbing their grip. But the laundresses work through it, not fighting the discomfort, but accepting it as the cost of clean cloth. A large wool cloak is lifted next, one of those thick, heavy things meant to protect someone from cold air, rain, or foggy nights. When soaked, it becomes almost a full-body challenge. The laundress braces herself before lifting it. Water streams off the edges in thin sheets, splattering onto her skirt and the stones below. The cloak hangs from her arms like a drenched animal, shapeless and stubborn. She carries it to the rinsing spot, arms trembling just slightly under the weight, and lowers it into the river with a controlled descent. The river swallows it slowly, bubbling around the edges, as if it too recognizes the burden. Every piece has its own weight story. Fine linens glide through the water but hold tight to their dampness until wrung out with precision. Hemp cloth stiffens into something that feels half like fabric, half like bark. Wool behaves like an anchor disguised as clothing. The laundresses' baskets tell the tale as the day progresses. Early in the morning they sit empty on the grass, light enough that a gust of wind could tip them over. By midday the baskets sag under the weight of dripping fabric waiting to be rinsed. By afternoon they are nearly impossible to lift without a deliberate and calculated effort. You watch one woman lift her basket by the handles. The weight drags her arms downward, forcing her to lean back slightly to counterbalance. She carries it only a few steps before lowering it again, shifting her hands, re-gripping, and lifting with a slow, determined exhale. These movements are not dramatic or heroic. They are simply the mechanics of survival in a time when nothing is light and nothing is easy. The dryer's line, once empty, now bends under the weight of the waterlogged cloths pinned to it. The rope strains but holds. Garments sag heavily, dripping steadily into the grass below, forming little puddles that glint in the sunlight. The laundresses wipe their forearms against their aprons, leaving streaks of clean water on already damp cloth. Their breath forms a nearly invisible rhythm. Inhale before lifting, exhale during the effort, and inhale during the pause between tasks. Even their breathing becomes part of the work. In the end, the weight is more than physical. It forms the day's pacing. It dictates the slowness of motion. It shapes the women's posture, their gait, their strength. The laundresses don't dwell on it. The heaviness simply exists as part of the daily cycle of work that begins each morning and ends only when the final garment is drying in the sun. The river hums along, carrying away the suds and the strain, and the laundresses move with quiet endurance, lifting, wringing and hauling until their bodies remember nothing but the steady rhythm of effort. Despite the weight, despite the cold, despite the endless repetition, the washing green is not a lonely place. It is one of the few communal spaces where women gather daily by necessity, and somehow, within that necessity, the community grows. You observe the subtle interactions that happen without a single word exchanged. A shared rhythm forms among the laundresses as they work side by side. Shoulders rise and fall at similar intervals. Backs bend in unison. Tubs are moved at the same quiet pace. Tools are set down with matched familiarity. Bodies align the way musicians do when they settle into the same tempo, even without hearing each other speak. A sense of shared understanding hangs in the air. These women know each other's routines. They know who begins the day at the farthest stone. They know who prefers to wash linens first and wool last. They know who wrings with the strongest hands and who sorts with the sharpest eyes. It is an unspoken choreography, refined by years of standing on the same patch of earth. The washing green becomes a kind of social centre, not lively, not grand, but steady and quietly human. You see it in the small gestures. A laundress shifting her basket slightly to make room for another. Someone offering a cloth to dry hands. Another passing a piece of soap root without being asked. The exchanges are subtle but meaningful, woven into the work rather than interrupting it. Children sometimes wander near the riverbank, small shadows darting between the women. Young helpers pick up fallen clothespins, fetch buckets, or carry small loads. They absorb their mother's movements, learning through imitation long before they understand the work's weight. Their presence adds a faint lightness to the green, a tiny contrast to the heavy fabric and cold water. Older laundresses set the pace. Their movements are slower but more precise, shaped by years of doing the same tasks until the body knows every angle, every strength needed, every rhythm required. You watch one gently adjust the way a younger woman spreads a garment across the stone. The correction is small, a shift of the wrist, a change in angle, but it carries generations of experience. Shared bread appears during brief pauses, a crust is torn into portions, a bit of cheese is set aside on a cloth. The food isn't plentiful, but it's enough to keep the body moving and enough to mark a moment of rest. The sun warms the patch of grass they sit on, creating a simple comfort in an otherwise tiring day. Even the silence becomes a bond. The quiet is not heavy, it is peaceful. The sound of water fills the space between them along with the steady beat of wet cloth against stone. The rhythm becomes the background to their thoughts, a kind of meditation forced upon them by the nature of the work. You see one laundress straighten for a moment, arching her back to relieve the strain. Another glances up at the sky, checking the position of the sun. A third brushes her damp hair from her forehead with the back of her wrist. These are the small movements of shared fatigue, the unspoken acknowledgement that everyone is tired, yet everyone continues. The washing green holds an entire world within its borders: labour, skill, endurance, companionship, and the quiet comfort of being understood without the need for spoken words. By afternoon, the bonds among the laundresses are woven as tightly as the fabric they clean. The work is communal, whether the garments belong to wealthy households or humble cottages. Clean clothes for the town depend on these women standing shoulder to shoulder at the river, creating order out of the daily chaos of life. The sun warms the stones. The river flows in its gentle, unbroken path. The women continue their slow, steady work, held together not by conversation but by shared purpose. And for that purpose, the washing green becomes more than a workplace. It becomes a place where lives touch quietly, where routine builds unity, and where the simple act of doing the same hard task together creates a bond stronger than any spoken word. As the day settles into its middle rhythm, a quieter form of work emerges. The heavy beating and wringing give way to something more focused, the precise, careful business of stain removal. Here, the laundresses become technicians of the medieval world, specialists in the old, practical chemistry that existed long before anyone bothered naming it. You move closer as one of them lifts a linen shift from the rinsing pile. The fabric hangs limp and pale, clean in most places, but still bearing marks, faint shadows of ink, smudges of grease, a few stubborn patches of something no one truly wants to identify. These stains tell their own stories. Someone's clumsy writing, someone's spilled supper, someone's long walk through muddy streets. Every mark has a cause, and the laundresses know them all without needing an explanation. They begin with the easiest solutions first. Milk, set in a small wooden bowl, waits for ink stains. When dabbed onto the affected area, it softens the deep, dark marks enough to coax them loose. You watch the fabric absorb the milk in slow little blooms, pale and spreading. The laundress presses the cloth gently between her palms, working the liquid through the fibres with a steady, even pressure. Ink surrenders reluctantly, fading into a lighter shade that signals progress. Nearby, a jar of stale urine sits open. Yes, you heard that right. Stale urine. Can you imagine the interesting aromas of the medieval age in your mind? The scent is unmistakable, sharp, acrid, and unapologetically pungent, but urine, rich in ammonia, has its uses. It cuts through grease and stubborn organic stains better than most natural substances available. You watch as a woolen tunic with a wide, dark smear is lowered towards the jar. The laundress dips a cloth into the liquid and presses it firmly against the stain. Bit by bit, the mark releases its hold. The fibres lighten under the treatment, the grease dissolving into something that can be washed away in the river. This part of the green feels strangely scientific. No beakers, no glass tubes, and no mysterious powders. Just knowledge passed quietly down through generations. Every laundress here carries decades of learned technique, inherited without ceremony. They recognize which stains will respond to which treatment, which fabrics can endure the harsher methods, which marks are truly permanent and must simply be accepted as part of the garment's character. Herbs come next. Dried bundles of sage, thyme, and rosemary rest in small baskets scattered along the grass. These herbs are crushed between calloused fingers, releasing their oils into the cloth with a slow, circular motion. Herb oils lift odors, soften fibers, and leave behind a faint, earthy scent that hints at fields and kitchens and hillside gardens. A linen sleeve receives this treatment now, pressed firmly, rubbed methodically, and eased back into freshness through the combined power of water, thyme, and plants. Chalk lies in a small bowl, reduced to soft powder. The laundresses dip their fingertips into it and dab it onto greasy spots that survived the urine treatment. Chalk absorbs the oil delicately, drawing it up from the fibers. You see it cling to the cloth like a thin dusting of pale snow. After a few minutes it can be brushed away, taking the last traces of grease with it. It's a small, satisfying victory each time the fabric brightens under the touch. The work here is slower, almost meditative. No pounding, no scraping, no striking, just detailed, attentive labor. The laundresses kneel on the grass or bend over the stones, their movements patient and intentional. Fingers press, palms smooth, wrists tilt with controlled precision. Every gesture is purposeful. You notice the quiet confidence in their posture. This is not guesswork. This is a craft, a deep practical understanding of how cloth behaves, how stains cling, how water, herbs, minerals, and oils interact in ways that modern chemistry would eventually quantify, but these women have mastered through lived experience. The river continues its soft murmur nearby, carrying away the remnants of lye, suds, ink, and grease with no complaint. Sunlight glints off the surface, warming the air just enough to make the task feel slightly less punishing. Shadows shift slowly across the grass as the day moves forward. Each garment receives its own attention. A wool cloak with a muddy hem is lifted and examined. Chalk is patted along the edges. A linen apron with a yellow stain is dipped into milk. A torn sleeve is rubbed with herbs to remove the smell of smoke. The laundresses move from piece to piece, never rushing, never pausing too long. The work continues at a steady, comforting pace. Sometimes, rarely, a stain refuses all treatment. The fabric holds its mark stubbornly, locked into its history. In these cases, the laundresses simply fold the garment with quiet acceptance. Not every challenge has a solution. Some stains must remain, softened, but not erased. Medieval life leaves marks on everything it touches. Over time, a new pile grows, the cleaned, refreshed garments ready for drying. These pieces look lighter somehow, as if relieved of the weight of their stains. You see them laid carefully across the grass or placed into baskets, prepared for the next stage of the cycle. The washing green feels calm now, a place where technique and patience meet in soft, steady motion. It is a slower part of the day, but no less important. Here, the women shape the final quality of their work, applying skills honed through repetition and intuition. The stains fade, the cloth brightens, and the laundresses move quietly toward the next task. The drying stage unfolds with a gentleness that stands in stark contrast to the morning's relentless beating and scrubbing. After hours of immersion, wringing, and treatment, the garments are finally ready to rest, spread wide, opened fully, exposed to the sun and the air in a slow return to dryness and shape. You walk with the laundresses as they lift the freshly washed pieces from their baskets. The fabric still holds weight, damp and cool to the touch, but no longer sopping. This is the transitional phase, not heavy enough to exhaust the arms, but not light enough to forget. Each garment drips softly, releasing thin trails of water into the earth. The drying area stretches along the riverbank, a patchwork of woven ropes, wooden fences, low hedges and sunlit bushes. Nothing is uniform, everything is practical. Some ropes sag more than others, stretched over time by woolen cloaks and heavy linens. Fences lean at tired angles, but still support another day's worth of cloth. Bushes offer their branches generously, even though they snag at hems and threads. A laundress spreads a linen sheet over a long rope. She lifts it high, letting the breeze catch beneath it, then smooths the corners with a firm, practiced sweep of her palms. The sheet settles into place like a flag without ambition. Sunlight presses against the damp surface, brightening it gradually as the fibers begin to release their moisture. Another garment is draped over a hedge, a wool tunic that must dry slowly to avoid losing its shape. Wool demands patience. Too much sun and it stiffens. Too much shade and it stays damp forever. The laundresses know exactly where to place it, judging by the feel of the air, the angle of the sun, and the faint breeze drifting down the river. The smell in the drying area is one of the most comforting of the whole day. A mix of sun-warmed cloth, crushed grass, leftover soap root, and the faint mineral scent of river water evaporating from fabric. The breeze carries it gently, making the air feel calmer, softer, almost forgiving. You walk among the garments and hear the light flapping of cloth in the wind. Linen rustles with a crisp, airy sound. Wool shifts in heavier, slower movements. Hemp hangs quietly, stubborn as always, drying at its own deliberate pace. The laundresses step back frequently to assess their work. They lift corners to check moisture. They rearrange pieces so smaller items receive enough sunlight. They turn garments over to ensure an even dryness. Everything happens slowly, but with intention. Drying is nature's task, not theirs. In damp regions, this process can take much longer. You imagine days when the sky remains stubbornly overcast, when the air is so wet that drying feels impossible, when every garment must be brought inside at dusk, still half damp, only to return to the ropes the next morning. Today the sun cooperates. The warmth spreads with steady generosity, making the drying green feel almost peaceful. This waiting period brings a rare pause in the rhythm of the laundress's day. They sit on the grass or lean against stones, allowing their bodies to rest while their eyes stay attentive. They mend garments that need small repairs. A frayed edge, a loose thread, a small tear not worth a full seamstress visit. Their hands move slowly, stitching in gentle arcs, guiding the needle through softened cloth. You watch as a linen apron is folded carefully and set aside for mending. The laundress threads her needle with a calm steadiness, guiding the fibre through the weave with careful precision. Tiny stitches appear one after another, evenly spaced, barely visible when complete. These repairs are not paid work, just quiet maintenance done out of pure necessity. A few birds drift overhead, drawn by the movement of cloth in the wind. They circle lazily, uninterested in anything except the shifting brightness below. The river glides on, its flow constant, a quiet companion to the drying garments. Time moves differently in this setting. The drying stage allows for stillness, a chance to breathe, to pause, to settle into the long afternoon without any urgent demands. It is one of the only restful moments in the laundress's day, a brief intermission between labour and the final tasks that still await. As the sun sinks toward a warmer angle, the garments begin to lighten. Corners flutter more freely, edges lift with ease. Some pieces feel almost warm when touched, carrying the gentle heat of the day in their threads. The drying green fills with small signs of progress. Cloth that no longer droops with moisture, ropes that sag a little less, shadows shifting across fabrics as they brighten under the sun. And slowly, patiently, the garments move from damp to dry. One breeze, one ray of sunlight, and one passing cloud at a time. By late afternoon, the drying green has transformed into a soft, fluttering gallery of sun-warmed fabric. As the light shifts from bright gold to the deeper, calmer glow of evening, the laundresses step forward once more, ready to bring order to the day's finished work. You walk with them toward the drying ropes, the hedges, the low fences, and the branches where garments now hang lighter, cleaner, and ready to be handled. A linen sheet is the first to come down. The laundress lifts it from the rope and holds it at arm's length. The fabric ripples gently in the softened wind, its texture catching the last of the sunlight. With practiced movement, she folds it in half, smoothing the edges with the flat of her hand. Then she folds it again, and once more, each crease pressed with a slow, patient motion. The sheet becomes a neat rectangle. She places it into a basket and moves on. The folding rhythm spreads across the drying green. You hear the movement of cloth more than the movement of people, the soft whisper of linen sliding through fingers, the heavier thump of wool being shaken out one last time, the crinkle of hemp as it yields grudgingly to its final shape. Each fabric resists or cooperates in its own way. Each one demands a different technique. Garments belonging to wealthier households receive particular attention. Their folds must be crisp, the edges aligned, the surface free of wrinkles that might suggest careless handling. A fine linen shift is smoothed more than once. A woolen cloak is brushed gently to lift the flattened fibers. Even a pair of hose gets folded with a precision that speaks to pride rather than necessity. The laundresses do not rush. These are the garments that earn them coins and reputation. The clothing of peasants and labourers receives simpler treatment, but not in a totally dismissive way. A tunic is folded into a compact square. An apron is rolled neatly and tied with a strip of leftover thread. A child's shirt is folded gently, the fabric thin from many years of wear. These items look humbler, but they carry their own dignity. They will be worn again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next, continuing the cycle of work and life. As each garment comes down from the rope, the laundresses inspect it for minor repairs. A loose hem gets tucked back into place with the point of a needle. A frayed tie is reinforced with a quick stitch. A torn edge along a sleeve seam is closed with tiny, even steps of thread. These repairs are not paid tasks. They are simply done because the women understand survival, because clothing must last as long as possible, and a few minutes of quiet mending now prevents much greater work later. You watch one laundress kneel on the grass with a small pile of garments beside her. She threads a needle, the motion slow and deliberate. The thread slips through the eye with a clean line. Her hands move steadily, pulling the needle through the cloth, knotting the end, smoothing the seam. The fabric responds under her touch, the tear drawing closed like a wound being stitched after a long, messy ordeal. She knots the thread firmly and snips the excess with a small metal blade. All around you, the drying green shifts from a space of labor to a space of quiet order. Baskets fill one by one, lined with careful folds. The shadows of garments disappear as ropes empty. Even the air changes, warming slightly as the sun dips lower, carrying the faint smell of clean cloth, softened grass, and fading soaproot. Delivering the garments becomes the final task of the day. You walk with the laundresses as they lift their baskets, some small, some nearly overflowing, and begin the slow journey toward the village. The path is familiar, the ground uneven but predictable beneath their feet. The baskets press into their hips or rest against their ribs. Their arms hold the weight with steady endurance. Each household receives its garments differently. For the wealthy, delivery requires careful presentation. Baskets are set down with deliberate placement. Folded garments are stacked in precise order. Linens here, wool there, and smaller items tucked neatly on top. The laundresses straighten the edges, adjust the stacks, and leave the laundry as if arranging the shelves of a small, quiet archive. For the humbler homes, the process is simpler. Tunics, aprons, and hose are placed on benches or tables, layered without special attention, but still neatly enough to show respect. A folded sheet is set aside for a family with children. A patched cloak is placed on a wooden stool. A pair of mended trousers is hung on a peg near the door. The laundresses do not linger. The delivery is a steady continuation of their work, not a moment of praise-seeking, not a chance for recognition, but simply another step in the chain of tasks that shape their days. By the time the last basket is emptied and the final garment returned, the sun has settled low against the rooftops. A warm, muted glow washes over the village streets. The laundresses turn back toward the path that leads to the riverbank and gather their tools one last time. The washing green behind them is quiet now. Empty stones, empty ropes, and empty baskets, all resting beneath the fading light. Another day's labor complete. You feel the day winding down with them, your steps slower, the air gentler. The world ready to slip into evening. There is still a final chapter to the day. The quiet return home. Evening settles over the village like a well-worn blanket, soft and heavy. The sky deepens into shades of muted blue, then darker still, until the first small pinpricks of starlight appear overhead. The laundresses walk home through this dimming world, their baskets empty now, their hands raw, their shoulders carrying the memory of a long day's strain. You follow beside them as the last light slips behind the trees. The air cools quickly. The warmth of the afternoon disappears, replaced by a crisp breeze that brushes against damp skirts and lifts stray strands of hair. The scent of river water lingers faintly on their clothes as a reminder of the hours spent standing ankle-deep in the cold, beating fabric into something cleaner, lighter, livable. Their backs ache as they walk. You can see it in the slow roll of their shoulders, the slight arch in their posture, the careful way they place each footstep. Fatigue settles into their bodies the way dusk settles into the landscape. Gradually at first, then fully. The weariness is familiar and expected. A few women step into their small homes with quiet relief. The glow of hearth fires spills onto the dirt path, lighting the doorways with a welcoming warmth. Inside, the rooms hum with simple life, a simmering pot, a wooden bowl set out for supper, a small space to sit and rest weary legs. The laundresses set their tools aside for the night. Wooden paddles are leaned by the doorway. Soaked aprons are hung near the hearth to dry. Baskets are stacked neatly against the wall. A simple meal awaits not a smorgasbord, but enough to restore a little energy. A ladle dips into stew thickened with barley, vegetables, and whatever meat the household could spare. A small loaf of bread sits beside it, hard from the day, but softened once dipped into warm broth. The food grounds the laundresses, filling the hollow that hours of labor have carved into their stomachs. They eat slowly, their hands steady but tired. Each bite brings a small measure of warmth back into their bodies. The room glows softly in the firelight, shadows flickering along the walls, creating the gentle illusion of movement in a day already full of motion. After eating, some tend to their hands, rubbing a bit of animal fat into cracked knuckles, flexing stiff fingers, stretching wrists that have twisted and wrung and lifted more than most people will ever understand. Their skin bears the signatures of their trade: dryness, redness, calluses and lines etched deeply like roads on a map. In one corner, a laundress pulls a blanket over her lap. The blanket is coarse wool, scratchy but warm, practical rather than luxurious. She leans back against the wall and closes her eyes. Her breath flows out in a slow, steady release. Her muscles loosen just enough for her body to sink into the small space she calls rest. Outside, the village quiets. Chickens roost, dogs curl into tight spirals of sleep. The last hearths cast glimmers of flame onto the cobblestones before dimming into soft orange embers. People retreat into their homes, and the world around you drifts into a hush that only night can bring. The laundresses lie down on straw-filled mattresses covered with simple blankets. The mattresses are worn from years of use, flattened in the middle, creaking softly as they shift, but they welcome the weight of tired bodies. The laundresses stretch out, letting the day fall away from their limbs. Sleep comes not as a gentle invitation, but as something earned, a necessary surrender after hours of cold water, heavy cloth, bending, lifting, wringing and walking. Their bodies sink into rest quickly, without tossing or seeking comfort. Exhaustion is its own kind of blanket, wrapping around them until their breath slows into a quiet rhythm. The night outside deepens further. The river whispers in the distance, its voice softer now, a muted echo of the day. Stars spread across the sky, indifferent and ancient. The village sleeps, yet even in this rest, tomorrow's work waits silently in the background. The laundresses know it will arrive with the next sunrise, as inevitable as the tide. More garments will pile up, more stains will appear, more tubs will need filling, more stones will need scrubbing, and the cycle will continue, shaped by necessity and routine. But tonight that rhythm pauses. Tonight the washing green is empty. Tonight the laundresses breathe deeply in well-earned sleep. Their day ends not with triumph, but with quiet dignity, the kind that settles into the bones and reminds you that ordinary labor done faithfully shapes the world far more than any story ever admits. The river hums softly, the village dreams, and the laundresses rest, ready to rise again when the sky shifts from black to blue-grey, calling them back to the washing place. Well, my dear traveller, we've reached the end of our quiet walk. The laundry is folded, the baskets are empty, the stones are cooling, and the laundresses are finally home, tired, aching, but wrapped in the calm that comes after a long day's honest work. If this slow journey through the washing green helped you to relax, remember to like, subscribe, and ring that bell for more notifications. This will keep the archives thriving and bring more of these soft, peaceful stories your way. Rest well tonight. The river will still be flowing when you return to the archives.